White Americans no longer account for the majority of residents in hundreds of counties across the U.S. America's youngest generation, those born since 2000, is the most diverse ever. Nearly half, 49%, belong to a race or ethnic minority group other than non-Hispanic white. That's up from 44.5% from the generation before them, those born between 1982 and 2000. The nation's Hispanic population totaled 56.6 million as of July 1st, 2015, up by 2.2% from the preceding year. In 370 counties across 37 states, non-Hispanic whites were less than half of the population as of July 2015. That includes 31 new counties since 2010. These shifts could shape who wins this year's election.
Even if your native-born population is aging and declining, you can maintain your population by bringing in younger immigrants. This is something that Canada have been doing for years. Canada's fertility rate is a measly 1.5, but they accept 300,000 immigrants a year, more per capita than basically any other developed nation. For comparison, the UK accepts similar numbers of immigrants each year, but the total population is about twice as large. Canadian immigrants are on average 7 years younger than native-born Canadians too, which means that Canada's population will age slower than other, less immigration-friendly developed nations.
President Biden has authorized $100 million for Afghan refugees. The money is coming from an emergency fund to address the urgent situation in Afghanistan as U.S. troops continue the withdrawal and the Taliban seizes more territory. The United States is preparing to evacuate thousands of Afghan applicants for special immigration visas who risk retaliation because they worked for the U.S. government. The first batch of evacuees is expected to be flown this month to a military base in Virginia, where they will wait for final processing of their visa applications. The Biden administration says combat troops will be out of Afghanistan by September 11th.
Welcome back. You're watching Republic TV. Now, the White House has announced financial assistance of $500 million from the U.S. Emergency Refugee and Migration Assistance Fund to Afghanistan. The aid is aimed at meeting the unexpected refugee and migration needs as a result of the situation that's arising out of Afghanistan.
Let's take a look at what the United States has put out. This is the memorandum of the Secretary of State on unexpected urgent refugee and migration needs. It goes on to say, by the authority vested in me as President of the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, it's important to the national interest to furnish assistance under MRAA in an amount not to exceed $500 million from the United States Emergency Refugee and Migration Assistance Fund for the purpose of meeting unexpected urgent refugee and migration needs of refugees, victims of conflict and other persons at risk as a result of the situation in Afghanistan. Now, this is put out by the President of the United States, Joseph Biden. He goes on to say that applicants for special immigrant visas will avail of such assistance. Such assistance may be provided on a bilateral or multilateral basis as appropriate, including through contributions to international organizations, through funding to other non-governmental organizations, governments and U.S. departments and agencies. He goes on to say that you are authorized and directed to submit this determination to the Congress along with accompanying justification and to publish this determination in the Federal Register. So we're looking at $500 million in aid for the refugees and migrants from Afghanistan who are coming into the United States as we speak.
As the situation in Afghanistan unfolds, Refugee One on Chicago's far north side is standing by. The organization had already made plans to help until the sudden Taliban takeover left the country in chaos.
Last week, we were preparing to send about 10 of our staff to Fort Lee, where they had anticipated having a large number of Afghan special immigrant visa holders arrive.
The special immigrant visa holders include Afghan drivers, interpreters, and anyone else who risked their lives to help the United States government during the 2-decade-long war.
In the city of Chicago, we have an 83% murder rate that's unsolved. That same energy could have been used into finding the criminals, the murderers.
Norfolk Southern says the bait truck operation was aimed at catching people who've been stealing cargo, including guns and ammunition, from a nearby rail yard. including guns and ammunition, from a nearby rail yard.
The first order of business is to grab them by the tens of thousands and say, oh, it's an emergency. Can't do a background check. Can't count no heads. Go ahead and just grab them all and bring as many of them over here as you can and drop them off. Oh, it's an emergency. And where do you think they're going to take them to? Do you think they're going to take them to where the white folk live? Do you think they're going to take these buses to Fairfax, Virginia? Do you think they're going to take them to the Blue Ridge Mountains? Or do you think they're going to take them to Richmond? You think they're going to take them to D.C.? Think they're going to take them to St. Petersburg? Where do you think they're going to go, man? Where do you think they're going to go? Where do you think they're going to end up here? Do you think they're going to end up in Martha's Vineyard, or do you think they're going to end up in Tampa Bay? Where do you think they're going to end up at? Where do you think they're going to go? You think they're going to Scranton, or do you think they're going to Baltimore? Where do you think they're going to be dropping off all these quote-unquote refugees? Where do you think they're going? Why do you think they're hurrying up and dragging them in here? Folks, the Taliban just started moving in this week, and already you've got plane loads and bus loads. Remember that picture they've been showing on the news where that cargo plane was filled up with 600 of them, heading to a corner store near you with their refugee assistance in tow. They can't give you reparations, but they'll give them plenty of money to start a business. No credit required. Oh, you one of the refugees? Don't worry, the U.S. government will back you. Hey, what about us black folk you've been messing over 500 years? I ain't got nothing for you over here. Back up. We're going to help make sure we get these people set up to colonize your neighborhood. Now that we're done with it and the Asians have moved on, we're bringing in a new group for the purposes of colonizing your neighborhood. That's what we're doing now. And there are dimensions to this. There are layers to this. I want you to understand there's layers to this, which is why you have us here in the new black media to explain this to you. So what I want to do is I want to show you here. There was a clip from Tucker Carlson, and I want you to listen to what he had to say. He was reviewing what they were saying on CNN and some other outlets about bringing refugees here and whatnot, the Afghans and whatnot. And listen to what he has to say here. And I want you to ask yourselves if you ever thought you'd hear him saying something like this. I want you to understand what the real issue here is. Listen carefully.
The notion that their sort of horrific fear-mongering and racism doesn't carve out the men and women in Afghanistan who kept our soldiers alive for 2 decades is a new level of reprehensible.
So right-wing personalities using the crisis in Afghanistan to push an anti-refugee sentiment.
They're getting caught up in what I call the brown menace, which is this Trumper right-wing fear of people coming into the country from Central and South America. These people seem to be getting swept up into that xenophobia.
It's Stephen Miller's response to the collapse of Afghanistan, the fall of Kabul, the takeover of the Taliban was, look at Biden. He's trying to get brown people to come into the country. It's sickening and it's pathetic.
It's hilarious, is what it is. The right wing hates brown people. The only problem is most Afghans are not brown. Your average green-eyed Pashtun is as pale as anyone sitting on the set right now. Essentially, they're bearded white guys. Do the dummies on cable television know that? It's possible they don't know it. From their perspective, anyone who doesn't have access to the New York City subway must be a foreigner, and all foreigners are brown. We know that. They just are. So maybe they really think that. More likely, though, they know the truth. They know that calling you a racist... It's hilarious, is what it is. The right wing hates brown people. The only problem is most Afghans are not brown. Your average green-eyed Pashtun is as pale as anyone sitting on the set right now. Essentially, they're bearded white guys. Pashtun is as pale as anyone sitting on the set right now. Essentially, they're bearded white guys. Sitting on the set right now. Essentially, they're bearded white guys. They're bearded white guys. They're bearded white guys. They're bearded white guys.
If you want to know the reason that you have the black media, if you want to know the reason why we are the black media and the white supremacists fear us, I want you to understand. Yeah, I picked it up. First time I heard it, by the way. I want you to understand exactly what you're hearing there. do you understand what is going on in these places? Do you get it? Because when you hear Tucker Carlson say that and whatnot, even though he claims to be against them coming over here like that, just understand this kind of puts it in a new perspective for you, doesn't it? I mean, well, essentially they're bearded white guys. Yeah, so for a lot of you who have been operating under the delusion that somehow if they didn't originate in Europe the way you assume they would, that they're not Caucasian, white folk understand when they're looking at the so-called Middle East and who were the first slavers, when they look at the Afghans. Yeah, you notice that?